I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics, and I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
Welcome back to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. Today, it's us getting ready for spring bear season. It's you getting ready for spring bear season. It's our Range XP. We're mounting scopes. We got our resident scope mounting expert, Gun Wikipedia.
Oh boy.
Jared Smethurst. How
It's
are
a
you,
long
Jared?
title. I'm good.
That's not even your actual title.
Yeah, you're a repeat podcaster at this point.
Been on a couple.
When it gets technical, we call in the big guns.
We do. And then there's me who gets to ask all the dumb questions, which are good.
They're not dumb questions. There's no such thing as, there is a such thing as dumb. Whoever said there's no such thing as, they're wrong.
They're wrong.
They're wrong. But, Jared, we're going to unbox a Range XP. We're going to mount the scope. We're going to set that thing up, adjust the length of pull, adjust your cheek weld.
Yep.
We have very different cheeks, you
This
and
is
I.
there. You know what? The good thing about this rifle, it accommodates a variety of cheeks. So
We're going to get our scope leveled,
Yeah.
mounted, and talk through, like, basically getting to our break-in process, right?
yeah,
If you're listening to this, we're going to do our best to describe everything that's going on. This might be a good one to go check out the YouTube on if you want to see the particulars. So
Okay, so before we open the box of the gun, what's our like minimum setup for us to do this?
So minimum setup, really, you need something to place your gun or hold your gun. I've done this on my lap, but man, having like a gun vise is a lot. Just makes it a lot easier.
I actually have a gun vise at home, but often won't whip it out. But I do have just a standard shop vise with like soft jaws.
Yep.
And it on the soft jaws, I'll just stick the barrel in there
Mm-hmm.
and do it that way. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. So yeah, on the manufacturing floor, like most, if you ever take a tour of Weatherby or whatever, almost all of them are just shop vices, and they have jaws that clamp on barrels. So that is kind of like the professional way to do it.
Sweet. Yeah, I think on Brownells or Midway, they actually have like a barrel for a 4-inch vise or 5-inch or 6-inch vise jaws. There's a little like soft jaw that has a triangle cut, so it'll grab your barrel. It's pretty slick.
And I think even Tipton's starting to make like a ball head one that mounts to your tabletop now too, to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a vise.
Yep.
Tools.
Tools, it depends on your rings, but basically you just need, like for our rail, we need a T10. For our rings, we need a 1/2 inch and a T15. And you know what? It really helps to have a fat wrench or some type of torque, limiter, basically something that, if
You want to make sure you're not just
Yeah.
absolutely crushing everything,
Yeah.
right? You want to pay attention to what they call torque specs.
Scopes mount screws are fine thread, and if you get a little Western on wrenching on those suckers, then you can have some problems.
yeah, we have broke many a scopes. So it is good to at least, you can always go tighter, but sometimes when you want to go looser, you've gone too far.
Yeah,
So.
I think I'll also just give a preface that there's a lot of probably methods of how you level, how people do it. Some might incorporate lasers. This is how you do it to some degree, how we all do it. But if you already have a super dialed in process, awesome.
Yeah. This is kind of that nitty gritty. If you're going to do it yourself kind of thing with minimal gear, I think this is a pretty everything that we have here is not like crazy expensive. It's
Nor do you can cut out a few different things. You don't need a gun vise, but it's helpful. You don't need a torque. Torque
I think
wrench,
you do.
But
I say you do.
Yeah.
If you've been doing it a long time and you're like careful, you're fine. But it definitely helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you do need that. A little bit of Loctite maybe.
Yep, Loctite if you want to do the bases, but it's not super necessary, but it does. It's one of those If you check it and you do it right the first time and you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to worry of that ever backing off during a hunt or anything else. So I do like using Loctite on the rail itself.
Awesome. Let's pull this Range XP out of the box.
So we have a Range XP. It's a 6.5 RPM, kind of a sweet caliber, good caliber for bear season, I would say. So we're going to go through all of the things that you get. So their sheet is.
Throw that in the vise.
And then if you're watching this, you'll get a baggie full of all the goodies that you need to help set this thing up. So we've got our bolt in here. So I'll give that to you, Jared. Other cool things with Weatherby Firearms is we do offer Silencer Central tax stamp, free tax stamp voucher if you're looking to buy a suppressor. And then we also do Onyx Elite membership.
Hold on. We just glossed over that pretty quick. So Silencer Central, $200 tax stamp, every Weatherby rifle, basically.
Yep.
So you can call Silencer Central, say you got a Weatherby, and you got $200 towards your tax stamp, towards your suppressor. That's a pretty good deal.
That is a great deal, and that's free money. This is ready threaded, ready for your suppressor. We'll probably actually do a backcountry on this thing as well.
The Banished backcountry.
Banished backcountry.
Yeah.
Big fan. So, and then other one, Onyx Elite membership trial. So.
Yeah, if you're not using Onyx Elite, you're doing it right.
You're doing it wrong.
I don't know what else to say about that.
Then there's a bunch of manual stuff in here. You got your trigger guard lock.
Thanks, California.
Sweet Weatherby sticker, and then here are some of the goods. So
and don't joke. You should always keep your firearms safe from children, but use the gun safe for that, or another safe location.
And then we have our spacers, which is for our length of pull that we'll do here in a second, and then your brake.
Yeah. So first thing, your pointer bolt out. I just set it there because that's what I'm used to doing. But basically, the first thing, you can either clean it first, or you can mount your scope. It doesn't really matter. We could go ahead and start mounting. But basically, before I shoot, any gun I get, doesn't matter who it's from, what it is, I'm always going to clean it first and make sure like the barrel's completely, clear of any debris or manufacturing goo or whatever else. But yeah, the first thing you're going to do is take off your neat little.
So these are the scope mount screw hole
plugs. Yeah.
And the reason those are on there is that during shipping, during anything else, it's just to prevent any debris from getting into the action, thus maybe into the barrel. So a lot of people ask, why do we have those things? That's why.
Yep. And then from here, we've got a 307 Peak 44 rail.
Yep, the J-rail.
The J-rail.
Oh boy.
That's what is it?
So you had a little something to do with the J-rail, J-rod.
I did. So, well, I should have made a bigger cut on the side of that thing.
Did you do the packaging too to make it super secure?
It's very secure. So
I think the clever thing on this J-rail is we've talked about it on the podcast before, but the last couple teeth are removed on the pick rail so that you can move your scope a little further towards the muzzle without hitting. The scope we're mounting today is not really going to be a problem, but some other big rear oculars do make a difference there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a big popular thing with scope manufacturers now, is using really large oculars, magnification rings that really eat up a lot of real estate. So makes it nice for mounting to really have and you can mount it as low as you want too. You can get some really low rings nowadays, which are pretty nice.
So that J-rail comes with 4 screws. Does it matter which ones go where?
No, they're all the same. That's nice too about, round receiver bodies. They're all the same screws, 840s. So really beefy. If you're used to seeing like, 648s, they're like substantially larger too. So that's nice.
And this is a 20 MOA rail, correct?
Yep, 20 MOA. So the reason you would want to do like a rail, we also offer tally rings that will mount directly to this that are
to the receiver.
To the receiver. So it'd basically be your rings mounting directly to this, to your scope. Those are great. I really like those too. But with a rail, you do get 20 MOA, which is nice. So, and what that means is basically you've already, your scope is already angled 20 minutes of angle. So you have more adjustment at longer range.
Which on 6.5 RPM, 20 MOA gets you about 1,000 yards.
It gets pretty far.
It's pretty darn. I think it's like last time I had a 6.5 RPM dialed with a 300 yard zero. I think it was just over 20 MOA for 1,000 yard shot. Just from memory, I could be off, but I'm pretty sure it's close to that.
So what I'll do is I'll take just a little bit of Loctite and I put those on the screws. We'll put them in there, and
I think when you mount a rail, using Loctite is a really good thing because it's a little bit harder to check these screws once your scope is mounted, and most likely if you're going to commit to a pick rail on your rifle, you're probably going to stay with a pick rail on your rifle. So getting that semi-permanently attached with some Loctite's a real good thing.
Yeah. And generally what I'll do is I'll like get all the screws started before I start torquing
you're
on
getting
anything.
to right where you're getting like real resistance, it looks like.
Yeah. So basically just getting to where, I can feel a little bit, but they're basically all about equal. So
you don't want to like crank on one end, right?
Yeah, not torquing, just getting to where I'm starting to feel where they're actually biting a little bit. So
in that J-rail kit, did it come with a bit?
it does. Comes with a bit, so you're good to go on that.
That's a T20 or so?
This is a T10 actually.
T10,
so
yeah.
And then I think it actually comes with one extra screw too. So, and then the torque spec on this is about 20 inch-pounds. Make sure I'm not in between the line. And I'll just start kind of going down the line of getting them pretty close.
Tightening her up. Yeah, I'm looking for that good click.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Make sure we're good all the way down.
So all four screws into the action and torqued.
And they're actually tapered screws too, which is really nice. So they're actually angled, so it kind of self-centers too. So you don't have to pay too much attention. I mean, it's
the
good
head of the screw is tapered, so that it's going to automatically pull the pick rail into concentricity with the bore.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So then after that, we'll put our rings on. So here's some bases. These guys there's a lot of good manufacturers out there. But basically, as long as you don't sort on Amazon by cheapest, you're probably fine.
Okay, great point. So you've done this a few times. You've got the frontmost mount all the way to the front of the pick rail.
And I might actually change that. I'm just going to see generally where I'm at here. Okay. So I actually probably am going to want...
What scope is this?
So this is a Leopold VX3 HD 4.5 to 14. So this is it's a great scope.
30 mil tube?
30 mil tube.
Okay.
Yep. CDS dial, side focus, and I think this has Winplex in it. So
nice.
Yeah, just a good all-around scope. I think I'll move that one back.
So based on why'd you decide to move that back?
Just to give myself a little bit more room, and I'll probably scoot it back like
that
so you can see.
Basically the area between the turrets and the bell of the front of the scope, you want to kind of center that as much as you can. Is that what you're trying to do?
Just by having it one back, it just gives me a little bit more room, if I want to adjust.
You have a little more travel.
A little more travel, so...
and that comes into play with where you want it to sit, you're right.
Yeah, and
what I'm saying here.
Yeah, and I guess I just have a preferred spot too. I know roughly where I want the scope. So, but you can absolutely just pop it on and off and just kind of play around and see where it's best for you. So, I would you have the pick rail, the whole length of it. So you don't necessarily want them super close together. You want them spread out, but still having enough room to move them about. The nice thing about pick rails is, with these rings, I'm not lapping anything that's not really needed, especially with pick rails on round receivers. If you're using decent rings, if you can move your scope around and you don't feel that biting or anything like that, you're actually pretty centered up. So, sometimes
so we're not lapping today.
We're not going to lap, just because it's not really needed. There are times where it's probably more preferable, but you can just see how smooth everything's moving around. It's concentric. There's nothing biting into the sides. So I think that's pretty good. So that's about where I want them. Now, whenever you're, basically whenever you're mounting this stuff, thinking about how recoil affects things, I'm going to be pushing these rings. See, that one had a little bit of travel.
Yeah, travel which way? So front to back?
So these are rings that I'm pretty sure you could use on weavers too. So there's a little bit of on weaver / pick rails, you'll have, or pick rings, you'll actually be able to move them forward and back a little bit.
Inside of the tooth.
Inside
of
the
each
tooth itself.
Pick tooth, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is push the rings as far forward as I can, because with inertia during recoil, that's the direction they're going to want to be
biggest
going.
hit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So just make sure, yep, nice and smooth and centered. And then take our 1/2 inch.
So back to the torque wrench.
Yep,
and,
back to the torque wrench.
What are you setting it to now?
65 on these guys, 1/2 inch nut. So takes a while to get
Yeah, got to crank her down. Almost there.
too far. Backing off a little bit. All right. It's just a habit. I know they're not connected, but
So you're just balancing your, yeah, I see what you're saying. So since they're not connected,
They're not
if it was
connected.
a one-piece mount,
Yeah,
you'd want
yeah.
to,
You would want to do one at a time. It's just I'm used to
just
doing
like
that
your
all
lug
the
nuts
time.
on your car. You don't want to do
Absolutely.
all the
Yep.
torque on one first.
Yeah. So then what we'll do is we'll get our scope kind of roughly where we want it, and then we're going to start. Place our caps.
When
on
do
there.
you like to level?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these started, and then get it to where you can just barely, you have a little bit of friction, and then start that kind of leveling, and also that eye relief, kind of figuring that out.
So this is probably a point where there's a lot of variation from here on how and when people level. My personal preference is I level off of that, basically half of the mount. I put a level on before I put the scope in,
Yeah.
and then establish my level, and then I use the barrel level clamp to see if I've moved it or not.
Yeah. So you could definitely, that is, if you're unsure of yourself and your ability, and that is the best way to go. Is at this point you would have either some set of level, you'd want this locked in, and you would either use the pick rail itself to level, or something like that, or the half rail absolutely is a good way to go. So we're actually gonna, this is bare bones.
Okay.
So this is without level, without anything. We're just gonna do this and eyeball it, and we can talk about some
Talk through the leveling.
Talk through the leveling.
These EGW rings, they've got a flat on the top, so you could compare your.
You could compare. And there's also too, with a lot of the leveling stuff, there's to think about, there's there's a lot of stacking tolerances. So like in a scope itself, you have the reticle at one angle, you can have the threading that the turret's on, and then people will put the turret, the level on top of the turret and all that stuff. And it's like, if you could just go off the reticle itself, it actually will give you a truer baseline of what your actual level is.
But essentially what we're trying to do is establish a level of the gun. If you put like a crosshairs inside of the bore of a gun, you want the horizontal crosshair to match with the horizontal crosshair of the scope.
Yep.
So we're trying to align our planes.
Yep.
Yeah, because like Wheeler will make a sweet scope mounting kit where you can have a level here on like the back of your receiver here, and then you true it with your barrel muzzle, and then now that's your constant, and then you can start leveling your barrel with the scope and doing all those things, right? So you can get as in depth like as you want on those. So
yeah, this is definitely an area where like as the more of these you do, the more you kind of develop your own personal system.
Yeah.
So
and it is one of those, if you're planning on using a scope level, like on the side of your rifle, this is a great time to utilize that or put that in conjunction too. A lot of them mount directly to the pick rails. That's a great time to use that is for mounting the scope and make sure everything's level. Part of that too is, and we can't really do it on camera, but my favorite way to level is actually like taking like mason line or whatever else, and using a plumb line, using it as a plumb line, and then just using that horizontal line in your reticle, and that'll or that vertical. Yeah, that's the one, and that will give you a perfect. That is what's important is going off that. So, but yeah.
Ramification. So if it's not level, what is that going to do to your downrange performance? So like some guys sometimes will be like, man, I've got it dialed at 100, but at 400, I can't seem to get it to hit left and right.
Yeah. So it'll be if your rifle is say your rifle is level or your scope is canted or whatever else. What's going to happen is your bullet travel as it's going is actually going to move out of the line of your vertical crosshair.
So you can get some real hard lefts or rights downrange based on your scope not being level. So if you're having troubles past 100 yards,
especially if you use a drop reticle.
So yes.
Yeah. So but also that also ties into making sure when your shooting position is level and your gun's level and everything else like that, and maybe using an anti-cant device, some type of indicator or level bubble is a good way to go.
You mentioned that briefly, but there's a couple styles of those level indicators. The ones that go on the scope, most of the time, you need to make sure you put that on your scope, not set necessarily yet, but at least put on and loose before you do the step you're doing here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have to take your scope off again.
Yep.
So I have done that before.
It's a little personal experience there.
Speaking from experience on that.
I've been excited to mess with MDT has like a pick rail one where it's like green is go. So like when you can't, it'll be red, yellow, and then when you're level, it'll be green.
Cool.
It's pretty cool. I'm excited to kind of mess with that one.
That's another feature. So Leopold VX6, which is as a in scope.
I have one of those.
2 degree, like it will start blinking if you're slightly canted, and it will like stop. Cool. Yeah, it's actually kind of cool. So, so that's tight enough.
So you've got it tight where you can still rotate it a little inside of the mounts, but it's definitely got a little bit of friction there, so you can change it and move how you need.
So a little bit of friction, and then you're standing there if you wanna. Am
I gonna shoulder this and make sure I know what I'm doing?
So, and I basically go off eyeball. Like I really, there's been.
What are we checking right here? Sorry. So just to be clear.
What we're checking here, and this is actually a couple different things.
Okay.
One would be we're making sure the reticle is lined up, right? That's where you want that to be level. But also too, we're kind of going off of, we're making sure eye relief is good on this guy. So
and for your eye relief, you want that at max mag, or what is your preference on that?
Depends on the scope. On this one, I would say max mag, which would be 14.5. Well, I can
hold that.
Yeah, for maybe for people that have a little less shooting experience, explaining eye relief is there's every scope's probably slightly different, but let's call it 4 inches or so back from the rear ocular is where like the ideal window to look through the scope is. So you want to make sure your scope is mounted so that when your cheek is on the rifle, you're not doing this head back and forth game.
For me, I'd go backwards.
Oh, right.
Trying to figure out
it's funny how
where you need to put your face.
Yeah. Sorry for talking over, but it's a little funny how this is very tailored to you. Like Jared needed to scoot his a little forward. For me, I would have brought it the way I shoulder a gun. I just need it brought back a little bit. So again, very.
Also, too, another trick that you can do if you're trying to figure out your eye relief, a really good way to do it, and like also height too, is if you close your eyes and you bring your rifle up to where your like natural point of aim is, and you open your eye and you see where that is, because generally, if you get behind the gun, you're instantly gonna
if you're looking the whole time, you're
gonna contort yourself to where you think you should be.
It's a good tip.
As opposed to closing your eye, getting set, opening, and then seeing where that lines up. So,
on this step, should we put our spacers in first so that your length of pull is correct? Or
yeah,
is that
would have helped on that one too. So we could do that.
But we'll adjust that here. But and we can finish doing this. But
Yeah.
that's probably a tip as well. Pro tip is make sure.
Well, we should do that first. If we're going to do that,
Yeah.
let's do that now because it would adjust where your scope's going to be mounted. So
Yeah.
Tyler's taking the screws out of the butt pad of the Range XP stock. So there's 2 screws that come out, and then there's 2 spacers that come in that plastic baggie that we talked about earlier.
just loosen them.
Yep. We just spin them
So
out.
the cool thing about this pad is that the screws are hidden,
They
so
are
you
hidden
might
in
not
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah.
You should see 2 little dimples in the back that is basically a hole that you can shove a screwdriver in, and you can either use a little bit of oil or spit on the tip of the screwdriver before you shove it in there, turn a little easier.
And it's a number 2 Phillips in the back there, so it's
You can do it.
I know.
It's a long screw.
It is a long screw because it's meant to have
Yeah.
room for the spacers. So.
Yep. I think I'm good about. Should we talk about? Well, I mean, like, so you have 2 spacers. If you have if you've got like long arms, long neck, you want a little bit extra than probably 2. But honestly, probably about the medium size is going to fit most people, like 1 spacer.
I'm 6'2". I'm not crazy picky, probably as picky as I should be because I end up shooting a bunch of different guns. But I think what fits me best is 1 spacer in there. Yeah.
This is when you bring out the DeWalt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's okay to probably remove with a power drill, but if you reinstall with a power drill, you might be asking for problems. Yeah. If you did do that, definitely put it on the lowest possible torque setting. But I recommend hand tightening.
All right, you want to put 1 on there? If you can poke them through.
You can use that screwdriver and poke them through beforehand. It'll save you a little headaches.
Like that.
Nice.
This is typically something you'll do, once. So if you're getting this all dialed in and set up for yourself, you can play around with it. But this is kind of a nice thing. Length of pull is kind of like a set and forget kind of a thing. Maybe if you buy this for like your son and he's growing or things like that too, starting with 0 spacers and growing up, putting a couple when he gets older too works.
Yeah, it is a set it and forget it thing for sure. It's not length of pull is typically not something you want to adjust frequently. Almost there.
That's good.
So now that we've got that length of pull adjusted, so these spacers are a quarter.
I think they're about a quarter.
They're just right at a
piece.
1/4 inch thick. So we added a 1/4 inch to the length of pull there. So Tyler, re-shoulder that, see what you think, and then we can adjust the scope accordingly to make sure we feel good about it.
Better, more better.
Do it.
I think I need to come back just.
So you feel like the scope was a little
If
too
it
far
was
away?
Too far away, and then
So he's gonna
then we
scoop
added
the
more
scope
space.
back.
So yeah,
Yep.
so we could scooter back a little bit.
Yeah, so we got compounding problems. He wanted a little more space to have his trigger hand feel comfortable from his shoulder, but now it's moving. Need to move the scope back to compensate.
And now this is actually a really good time too to adjust our cheek riser on there too. So I noticed whenever when you open your eyes, you brought your head
I
up.
had to peek.
Yeah. So I think that's a good time. We could. So this is just T15s, and if you pull these 4 screws, you can adjust your height.
So there's 2 on each side, and we've got a runner.
Want to get the other side?
Once those 2 come up, there's 3. Is there 3 or 4?
Three
There's 3 position holes, so you can't tilt it, right? It's just needs to set in there.
Yep.
If you use the top hole, use all the top holes, or if you use the bottommost hole, use all the bottommost holes. Tyler dropped another screw.
Man, you're not mounting a scope or anything if you don't drop something.
Temporary lose a screw.
Is there a torque setting for these?
hand tight.
Hand tight.
Yeah.
You heard it from Jared.
Yeah. I would say about a good solid 12 inch-pounds.
Okay.
So.
Would
Call
this
that
be a good idea
tight.
if you,
Pinky
again,
tight.
if you're not, if you set it and forget it, can you Loctite these? No problem. Like if you wanted to, or would you? suggest
in theory,
not
you
to?
could Loctite these, but
Yeah.
I don't know that it's not a good idea because the way that the recoil of the gun goes, these shouldn't loosen.
Gotcha.
These aren't a high stress. They're not going to vibrate a lot, so they're not going to work themselves out.
Yeah, and you guys, you might want to change that if you were running different rings or all the things, right? So.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got. It looks like we went up.
We went up one.
One
so
spot, which is maybe 3/8 of an inch.
You want to see it now?
Yeah, let's do one more time.
set this up for you.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that
more
looked
better.
natural. Fits great. Okay.
All right.
So the I'll call it the north-south of the scope itself looked like it felt good. Gun feels good. What's next?
Okay. So, and level's good.
Let me do that one more time. Do you have a? Some people are better at this than others. Oh yeah.
If we double check.
So yeah, I'm going to take a small exception to this. It's paining me that we're not like actually leveling the scope a little right now. I'm squirming. So there's a couple methods here. So basically what you're doing is you're just making sure that it feels level to the way you hold the gun.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so this might be personal preference, but I have used the scope levelers and then done everything right, and then at the end of the day, after everything is set, and I look through the scope and I'm like, that's not square. It's not completely level. It's not plumb. So I end up moving it to where it like looks actually
Yep.
square. So there's a little bit of, I don't know. Maybe it's after you scope a few hundred and then you it's just like or 1,000 or 2, and then you feel like it's like this is right.
Because
So
for me, I would do the wheeler scope thing
Yeah,
because I
I-
haven't mounted as many. So I'm like,
I have done
doing
it both ways, and I have done it this way, but usually when I really, really want to get into it, I'll level off of the mounts before I throw the scope in there, put one of the barrel clamps on here with a level to make sure I didn't knock it throughout the process.
Yep.
And then the hard part then is what do you level the scope to? And I'll start with a smaller level on the top turret, which I know may or may not be level.
A little pro tip that I've gotten from JD before is you take that top off, and that's even more. That's one less. You don't have the cap variance. You have just
one
the
less
turret
stacking
variance.
tolerance, yeah.
So
if you use a plumb bob, then that's gravity has to be wrong at that point. So
Which hemisphere?
both works for both.
I didn't know if we were in Australia or not.
Okay. And then
So you feel good about the position of the scope and you're getting ready to lock her down.
yeah. So
and you looked
scope-
through it too. You're not
scopes,
taking
yep,
my word
yep,
for it. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Well, he is taking your word for it. Yeah.
let's see here. We double check. Yeah. And I would say too, like this is one of those times where, they like looking like in, depending on like, having your bolt in there and things like that, and like squaring it up against, the objects like around basically the rifle helps me at least. But basically, so it's square, you're ready to go. And then you're just doing this like a tire, like you're going a little bit. What I'll do too is I'll actually run my fingernails along the both sides of that. Pro tip.
So the top part of the scope mount, basically the rings,
your caps.
it's a clamp. So you don't want the right side to come completely closed before the left side of the clamp. You want to try to get both sides equally compressed.
And are you doing 18? Is that typical specs most of the time?
Most caps are around 18. Some say higher and things like that, but 18 is probably about like probably the average, like 17, 18. I wouldn't do much higher than that. And honestly, too, the worst thing that's going to happen if you go too light is after shooting it, you'll see a little bit of movement. You'll see like scratches, basically like you're on the backside, like your scope scooching, as you fire. That's not good. You want to fix that. At the same time, if you just like, I'm going for broke and you like tighten that sucker down and you crunch your tube, you're going to run into issues. You ruin
an entire scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A couple things just doing it wrong different ways over the years to pay attention during this step is, as you're doing, just checking to make sure that each side one side's not compressed more than the other.
Yeah.
Second thing is we kind of take care of it for you with the J-rail, but at the back, make sure that your scope zoom ring is not touching anything. Sometimes in your setup process, you may have moved it too far forward, or it may have actually been sitting on the last tooth, and you don't really notice it until you go to tighten your rings down, and then you can't move your zoom ring, and you could actually do some damage to something. So.
Yeah, there's sometimes too where it will, like depending on the shape of it, where it will be clear in one position, but then you try to rotate and it's going to bind on, whatever lever or something. So yeah, another fun thing. And so I just kind of do a star pattern here, and I'm making sure too that they're both even.
Nice. So you're pulling the back. Do you always do the front one first, or is that just how you did it today?
Nope, that's just how I did it today. But I mean, generally I want them like relatively both snug, and then like just progressively snugger, and then I'm gonna, do them basic. I'm not having this completely loose and then torquing this down completely. You want them all tightening about the same time. And making sure too, if you take your fingernails or whatever, or just visually see, you can basically tell that they're basically
you're pretty
even.
Darn even.
Yeah.
There might be a smidge more on one side than the other,
and
but neither side is touching, which is the most important.
And usually I'm not like scoping like this. Like I'm over the top of it and I can check better. But yeah. So basically from here, you have your rifle is completely scoped up. It's ready to go. The next thing I would do, which I don't think we're gonna do here, but would basically I'm gonna do a couple cleaning patches through the bore, make sure that everything's clean and ready to go to the range.
Ready to go to the range.
With a question for you, with the toolless takedown, it being so easy, do you recommend cleaning anything in your bolt? Because like most bolts, you can't do this. Is there anything that you would want to do on maintenance, or just?
I think you're good. To start with, it's going to be you're oiled and greased in the right places and things like that. So if you basically you're Loctiting that everything you don't
Loctiting the pick rail to the
receiver. You want to not do that to the mounts. I don't use Loctite on that. Other than that, cleaning the bore and making sure everything looks good and you're good to go. So I would say for the most part, things like the bolt and everything else, trigger group, is going to be good to go. Cool. There's not much else that needs to happen.
Speaking of trigger, can we lighten that trigger?
That would require a small tool, which I forgot. So that was something that we talked about, but I forgot about that.
The Trigger Tech trigger that these come with is a Trigger Tech field trigger.
Mm-hmm.
They're factory set to about 3.5 pounds, but you can take them down to 2.5 and all the way up to 5, should you wish.
Yeah.
Usually I'm good with the factory setting, but going a little lighter doesn't hurt either. So It's personal preference. And there's just a little Allen hole just north of the trigger shoe, so towards the muzzle, and you can just adjust it a little bit. All right, so we got the scope leveled. Now in the box came our muzzle brake. And if we want to swap muzzle devices for shipping purposes, we ship with a thread protector, a thread cap. So you just remove that little bad boy. Lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, pretty sure.
And it's a 1/2 28, so it's basically compatible with everything. So everything from directional brakes, if you want to get a custom one, to suppressors, to you name it. It'll.
I like to go backwards a little bit and make sure
like
you're not cross-threading.
Yeah.
Because barrel's pretty hard steel, so you're not gonna. If you do start to cross-thread, you got problems. That should just seat right there. And then it comes with a little wrench. And then you can torque it a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy for now, but I just want to make sure that's on there good so it doesn't work loose over time.
Awesome. And then from here, like you could basically do whatever accessories or anything else you want. This does come with 2 swivel studs. So you have, and that is basically for bipods or whatever else. So I've got a Harris bipod, and this has been well traveled. I've used
That
this on all
thing's
sorts
seen
of stuff.
some use.
Yeah.
So the
This is
Harris
off my
style basically has 2 little posts that clamp into the sling swivel stud. Man, that's hard to say. And then as you tighten that front dial ring
Yep.
knob, then it grabs those.
Yep. You're good to go.
Yep.
It's fun.
Ready to roll. So when would you use a bipod?
I basically, anything that you can get prone or as low as you can, like I'm using a bipod, but it really depends on like where you're hunting. I'm, sure it depends. I always keep this on my rifle, and I've actually never shot an animal with my bipod. Like I'm always in a situation where I'm like, it's just a little too tall.
Nice.
So
I always prefer to try to get on my pack, like get prone, get on my pack. But sometimes on like super steep canyons and stuff, having that bipod, even on top of your pack, if you're a guy who always shoots on his pack, still nice to have that little 6-inch. Like I don't get crazy with my bipod, but I've been where it's like, man, I really need a bipod. So I have not gone with that one.
I'm a big Spartan bipod fan.
Oh, yeah.
And because it easily, you put a attachment on your rifle and then you can quickly attach and detach
A magnetic
And
bipod.
I have shot, Jared, a few things from the prone position using the bipod. And I think prone is by far the most stable
absolutely.
shooting position outside of like a lead sled. But,
Yeah.
I can't carry that in the backcountry.
Nope.
So
there's some pretty cool whitetail setups with some box blinds.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have some
there
lead
are
sleds. But
solid ones.
Yep.
So now you're getting
And then-
your
Yep. Just put my
sling.
Andy's leather Rhodesian sling on here. So that's a loop sling, and that is that's what I like. That's what I like to shoot.
or you could get like one that might match the gun a little better. A nice black rubber sling. That's probably what I would put on this one, Jared.
If you want a carry strap, that's fine. But if you want to like loop into it like a real rifleman, then you could use it.
I see what you did there. So basically now we're ready to go to the range and follow our break-in procedure, which we have another podcast on.
Yeah.
So only thing we really didn't cover is like bore sighting and getting ready to take that first shot.
Mm-hmm.
But there's probably a lot of videos on that too.
Yeah. Yeah, quickly, the good thing about bolt action rifles that we could just touch on, but bore sighting is basically where you're going to be having your rifle on a steady rest like this. You're looking through the bore, so you're just literally aiming the barrel at a target, and then you're adjusting the scope roughly to where the center of that is. And it's really nice. So
Then there's a few tools like a laser, bore sighter, and all of the things that you can get down and get it sighted in, or pretty darn close, right?
Yeah, there's some like it's harder if you're shooting with a suppressor, but if you're not shooting with a suppressor, or before you put your suppressor on, there's some magnetic devices that attach to the muzzle. I am not a huge fan of those because if you go to do not take those to the range, please, because if you leave that on there and then you take a shot with it still on, then you just are buying a new gun. You're going to have a problem.
The Bushnell one where it slips into the barrel and it actually has like a little ocular piece that you look through. Those are actually really nice.
Yep.
And they're not like mechanical. There's not like, it's not a laser. But as a company, Weatherby has received several rifles with the ends of the barrel blown apart because someone left that in there before they shot. So that's actually happened several times.
It has. And you want no bore obstructions when we're talking about projectiles going through your bore. So be careful with that. But I've had really good success with doing what you said. Remove the bolt, peek through the barrel. You got to have a rest of some kind, but aligning it with, I like a 300-yard target. We happen to have a 300-yard range downstairs. If you get the the target centered as best you can in the bore from the back of the gun, and then you put the reticles on the center of the target, and then you start shooting at 100 yards. I've never not been on paper.
Yep. And even if you're like a little bit iffy there, just scoot it up to like 25 yards. I stopped wasting ammo whenever I just started moving up that target, and I'm like, I'm going to like, take it in the ego, but I'm going to like 25 yards and just shoot. And then from there you can just, it's easy. So
then you're just fine tuning after that to establish your zero. That's a whole nother bag of worms, depending on where you want your zero. For a lot of the Weatherby Magnum cartridges, a 200 to a 300 yard zero I think makes a lot of sense. For some of the slower cartridges, I don't know, like 6.5 need more.
Yeah.
100 might make sense. 200 could be good for a Creedmoor as well, but
or even just how you're dialing. It might just be you're using a 3 to 9 or a 4 to 12, and you just want to do a maximum point blank range, which there's nothing wrong with, and you can. And that's
what do you mean by maximum point blank range?
Maximum point blank range is the easiest way to explain it is imagine shooting through a tube. And so say if there's
what's the longest tube you could shoot through?
Kind of, yeah. But like, and then also the diameter, you don't want the bullet to go below the bottom of that tube or go above it.
Right.
So you could zero your rifle for like a really far distance, but if you cut that distance in half, you're going to be shooting really high. So there's that like maximum point blank range is trying to get like, say 4 or 6 inches, saying how far can I shoot out before I have to like make any adjustments in the scope. So there's that.
Yeah, and the higher the velocity of the cartridge, the further out that maximum point blank range could be. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Jared, thank you. This is awesome.
Yep.
So, in summary, mount your pick rail or your bottom part of your rings and bases, your bases.
Yep.
And then get your scope on there.
Yeah.
That's where it can get, I'm sure there'll be some comments. Oh my gosh. Everybody goes a little different from there. I personally like a level. If it's your first time doing this, I recommend getting a little level.
And I would say too, like this is something that you shouldn't be like scared of doing yourself. Like I know a lot of people like will pay to have, their scopes mounted, or they don't want to like mess something up. But honestly, it's something that if you can learn to do yourself really easy. It's like changing a tire or anything else. Just don't over torque stuff, and make sure your barrel's clean. You're good to go.
And it's just super handy when you have the confidence to fix something, because things go wrong in the field all the time. And if you need to make a quick adjustment, if you're on a hunt and you have the bare tools with you in your truck, you can get that baby back on target without having to ruin your entire hunt. Especially if you're a Midwest guy traveling out west, you should be pretty proficient on knowing how to do that so it doesn't ruin a trip.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Another thing you can do that we didn't mention, but you can actually take like either nail polish or a Sharpie colored whatever, and you can actually mark where your screws line up in your mounts too. And that way you can actually see if there's anything backing out. It's just another like small trick of, pro tip where you can see if something's moving.
Yeah.
Just carry, I usually carry a couple bits with me to make sure I can cover my bases if something's moving over the course of a,
that was actually one of the last things that I was going to say is I think anytime you go into the field, you need the tools with you on your person, in your pack. You need the tools required to adjust your scope, basically to do that mounting in the field. You shouldn't have to, but you never know. Yeah. I've seen, has not happened to me, but I've been on hunts where it has happened to other people and they did not have the tools necessary to retighten, and you're like messing with their scope and you're trying to figure out why they can't hit anything. You're like, dude, your scope is swimming in those rings. And it's like, what?
I feel like it also goes just to your overall confidence as a shooter and marksman too. When you know you did it a certain way and you know how to fix it if it goes awry, you just feel more accurate. Like just even the things that I've learned since even being at Weatherby, like the more things you know, the more confident you feel.
Yeah. It's kind of like every race car driver is a mechanic first, like it's good to know your gear, know your equipment in and out, disassemble it, clean it, know it backwards and frontwards, and it makes you a bit of a rifleman.
Well said. Thanks, Jared.